All right, we're going to go through all the motions, and I know some people missed. Had to go away for 3 weeks, but anyway. So just enjoy watching us on those parts. I do have, but I'm not handing it out now. I do have, here's the complete sheet. So you can take that again. You could go online. You could watch. In fact, us going through it real quick, this might be all you need to do to kind of watch it and learn if you're, if you need some. We will, as we're going through this, kind of looking at the Bible as a big picture, we will still give refreshers. Okay? So, but you don't have this to look at, which is wonderful, because then you'll learn it better. So here we go. Do as much as you can. Ready? Creation, fall, flood, nations, 4,000 years ago, Persian Gulf, Salt, Sarah, Abraham, Lot, Terah, Tigris, Euphrates, Haran, Terah dies. Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, Dead Sea, Mediterranean Sea, Israel, Ishmael, Isaac, Esau, Jacob, Joseph, Egypt, Jews, Egypt, 400 years, bondage, Moses. I just have to hear the echo. Let my people go. No. 10 plagues, Passover, Red Sea, Mount Sinai, law, tabernacle, Levites and priests, offerings and feasts, counting the faces, Kadesh oasis, 12 spies, wanders, dies. Moab, again, that's where Riley's sitting. Moab, Moses. Second law, dies. Joshua, Jordan River, Jericho, divide, conquers, south, north, divides, settles, 12 tribes. Judges, 400 years, Deborah, Gideon, Samson. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes except Ruth and Samuel. United Kingdom, 120 years. Saul, no heart. David, whole heart. Solomon, half heart. Divided kingdom, 400 years. North, south. Israel, Judah. 1920, 08. Just to help people don't know who haven't been here, there's 19 kings in the north, 20 in the south. 0 good kings, 0 good kings and 8 good kings. Just letting people know who haven't been here. So 08. Prophets speak, shape up or ship out. Yes. Sorry. Where is it? Assyria, Israel scatters. Babylon, Judah exiles. 70 years. Persia, Judah returns. Zerubbabel, temple. Esther, queen. Ezra, people. Nehemiah. Let's just start again. Walls. 400 years. Silence. Christ. All right, now, that's where we left off. Next week, we're going to find out how not silent those silent years were. Because even though no scriptures were written, God was at work preparing the world for Christ. And so that's next week. This week, we have only gone through the books of the Bible from Genesis through Nehemiah, which are the historical books. But there are other books, and I put that on your sheet. By the way, so I don't forget, make sure you get this is the complete copy of the walk through the Bible and all that part. So I wanted to go through really quickly, and you'll see on your sheet, there's just like a one-liner to kind of get the gist of what of these books are about. First of all, there's two parts. There are what's called the poetic books, and that is Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon, because they're in a poetic, which different devices were used in Hebrew poetry. Sometimes they used the alphabet. But it wasn't our alphabet, it was their alphabet, and it kind of, each verse started with a certain thing, and Psalm 119 is a classic one of those. Every 8 verses, the first 8 verses start with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The next 8 verses, go with the next letter. They start with it, and on and on. And that's why it's the longest chapter in the Bible. You also have other poetry type things where what's called parallelism, where sometimes it's like 2 things are said and they kind of mean the same, or 2 things, opposite things are said. And so you'll see that a lot in Psalms and Proverbs. But we're not going to go into that. All I want to do is right now is just say, okay, here's when this book, at least the time frame, not just so much when it's written, but when did this happen? And you'll be surprised. The very first one, the book of Job. Some call it Job. Nobody calls it Job. Anyway, and here's the question. Okay, first of all, look at the dates. The dates go way, 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 way back. Scholars estimate he lived about the time Abraham did. And now the book was not written. It was a poem, long poem, story that went passed on by word of mouth. But it goes way on back. That's what the dates there are for. But here's the question it's answering. Is God worthy? And that is the blank. Is God worthy?
Worthy?
Yeah. Is he worthy? That's the question. God, Satan, and again, I had the whole thing about Satan coming and talking to God. I was like, wow, wipe him out. But Satan said, God says, have you considered my servant Job? I mean, he's righteous. He's, living his good life and all that. And he says, oh, that's just because, you have a hedge of protection around him. You've given him all these good things. And God says, okay, take all he has. And all the livestock, the camels, all this other stuff. There's like, in one day, 4 servants showed up with bad news. This army came and attacked, took all the camels. This, storm happened, and the last person was, your children were all together in a house, and the winds blew and it collapsed. They're all dead. Now, is God worthy to still worship after all that? And Job said, naked I came from my mother's womb. Naked I will return. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And that's chapter 1. Chapter 2, saying like, well, you haven't, skin for skin. He's still, healthy. And he says, you can smite him, but don't kill him. And so he has all these painful sorts of all that. So the rest of the book is these friends who are trying to give nice Christian answers, for the sorrow and the pain that he's going through. But through it all, here's the question. Is God still worthy? Even though everything's taken away, is God still worthy? Even if your health goes bad? Even if your kids are taken from you? The answer is yes. We may not understand it, but we can trust the Lord. Now, again, if I take this long for every book, we're not going to get through every book. So we got quite a few to go through. The book of Psalms. Most people are familiar. Again, it is the worship of God. And again, through all sorts of circumstances, through what a beautiful day to what a horrible day, God, why is my soul so downcast, and it really just shares a range of experiences and how to go to God with these experiences, how to praise Him, how to get through when things aren't going your way. When you're feeling attacked, all sorts of things. And again, most of the Psalms were written by David, but you also have Psalms that go back to Moses. And you have some that were written all the way in the exile, during the 70 years, after Babylon, took them. So that's the book of Psalms, of worship. The book of Proverbs is wisdom for life. Wisdom for life. Most of it was written by Solomon, and there are others who wrote. It kind of tells their names, and there was also a collection as well, of others, and so it's just, here's wisdom. Now here's what the book of Proverbs is not. It's not a promise book. It's typically, if you eat right and have your apple a day, the doctor will stay away. Okay, so that's not in the Proverbs, okay? But it's just, but you know what? Somebody can eat an apple every day and die of all sorts of, So it's more of a general, like some of the Proverbs talk about, a gray head is wisdom or something like that. I know a bunch of old fools. Anyway. But in general, it's just saying, these are some sayings to live by, to try to live your life by, of wisdom to go on. It's really interesting. The book of Ecclesiastes, which follows it, also written by Solomon, is kind of like a pessimistic thing. It is, life is meaningless. Sorry, make sure I give you your blanks. Life is meaningless without God. Solomon, remember, he had only a half heart. He started great and all that, but then he let all these things distract him from the Lord. And this is, very, very end of his life, and he's just realizing, oh, what a waste. I've tried to fill my life with all these things and all the pleasures, all the projects, all of this. Vanity of vanities, meaningless, empty, striving after the wind. And so it is sharing how life is meaningless. Now again, he wrote all these Proverbs, and at the same time you have Ecclesiastes that shows that, he's now kind of cynical about some of these things because of real life as he walks away. Job is another good balance. Here's a guy who does live right, does live according to, and things go bad, and it's just like, and I think they balance each other really, really well. And then the Song of Solomon, God's view on, just wanted to pause, make you think of, what's he going to say? Romance. God's view on romance. There's people who want to spiritualize this, but it's a man and a woman, and they love each other and appreciate each other in that. Now, in that, just like Paul in Ephesians talks about how the marriage is a picture of Christ. Yes, you can go there too with that, but it's just, again, it is a love poem. So anyway, now that's the poetry part. And I think a lot of those Psalms, Proverbs, people are very, very familiar with. Prophecy. Now, prophecy, people, and I don't know where this started, but people talk about, well, those are the major prophets, and these are the minor prophets. Really listen to the major ones. And now, what do they mean by major? What do they mean by minor? Now, I don't know how well you can see this, but I should have had a different color. But there's this gap here. These are the major prophets. And then there's a little tiny gap here. Those are the minor prophets. There's only four prophets in 5 books in this thick part. And there's 12 prophets, 12 books in this little thin area. So that lets you know they're major because they're just bigger. To me, some people are like, oh, that's written in red. It's more important. No, it's all God's word. It's all just as important, and stuff. So don't get, the other ones are worth reading too. A lot of it, though, is knowing what the context is, because it is not chronologically placed. If you look at the other side of your sheet, you'll see my efforts of putting together what the chronology is. You have the years that are on. Let me show this for the people back at home. So you have this. I started at David's reign, and then you have Rehoboam that goes down a column, and then you have Jeroboam, and that goes down a column. That's the north. South, Israel, Judah, 1920, right? Anyway, that's that. I did not write every king there because, one, some of them only lasted a month or just a year, and I couldn't fit them all in there. But just kind of some of the major ones that are there, and then placing the prophets there. Now, I added 2 that do not have books, and that was Elijah and Elisha, because everybody's heard about them, So that's kind of, that was during Ahab's reign initially, and then Elisha takes over, and he's the one who anoints Jehu, who gets rid of Ahab and his descendants and stuff like that. But again, so all that's there. So what I wanted to do is just walk through the different prophetic books and talk about what each one is. Now, here's the first one. Isaiah. You know what his name means? Salvation is of the Lord. Do you know what his book's about? Salvation is of the Lord. That's kind of neat how God did that. It's really interesting. The word salvation is used 27 times in this book. In that one book. In all of the other prophets combined, there's only 8 times it's used. So it's over and over and over and over again. Now, Isaiah's pretty big, still not the biggest. That's the next one. But here's another interesting thing about the book of Isaiah. How many books are there in the Bible?
66.
66, okay? Old Testament is the first 39. And the New Testament is 40 through 66. Okay? Isaiah has 2 basic messages: the need of salvation and then the provision for salvation. Guess what chapters those are? The need of salvation is chapters 1 through 39. The Old Testament is to point us, the law is to point us to our need for Christ. Even in just the numbers, I just kind of think, now I know later on these numbers weren't originally in there, but it's kind of neat. And then the remainder 40 through 66 is the provision of salvation. It begins with comfort ye my people. You hear about the servant of the Lord, which when you read it and you're like, that's Jesus, and so again, salvation is of the Lord. Then you have Jeremiah. Now, really quickly, turn your sheet over. Turn your sheet over. Look over there. You have Isaiah. Isaiah was right at the end of Uzziah. If you remember Isaiah chapter 6, in the year that Uzziah died, I saw the Lord. That's that passage. That's when he started. And then, he went through the whole reign of Hezekiah. And then his son, evil son, Manasseh, who we don't know the full story, but most likely had Isaiah killed. Some say, drawn in two. And then you have much further down, where you see Josiah, you see on its side Jeremiah, and that's kind of his time frame there. So Jeremiah is the last chance for Judah. Isaiah was written at the same time that Israel, the northern kingdom, was getting ready to be taken, and there was the threat of the Assyrians coming in, and Isaiah gave hope in that time. Jeremiah got to live through the time of watching his nation get worse and worse and worse, and until finally Babylon came and exile. In fact, the next book is Lamentations, and you know what it means to lament, to weep. This is the sorrow of sin. And there's 5 chapters, or 5 poems of Jeremiah weeping for the loss of seeing his nation destroyed during that time. So it's Isaiah, Jeremiah, last chance, Lamentations, the sorrow of sin. Then you jump all the way to the exile, and you have Ezekiel. Again, the reason they're listed here is because these are the bigger ones. Okay, so there's not any order. You have Ezekiel, and to put that in one phrase is the glory of God. The glory of God. Ezekiel has this vision of the glory of the Lord on the wheel upon the wheel, on this, and it's there. He sees it, in Babylon. Well, where's the glory of the Lord supposed to be? It's supposed to be at the temple, and God kind of transports him, there, and he sees the wickedness that's happening right there among the people. Yeah, it's during the exile, but not the last exile. And again, God shows him why my glory is leaving. And that's the picture of the glory, step by step, leaving the temple. At the end of Ezekiel, he talks about a new temple, and here's the dimensions, and here's the dimension, and all this other stuff. And he's not talking about the next temple that's built. He's not talking about the one that Herod built. He's talking about the future Jerusalem, and the glory comes back. I know, Mike, you want to share with you, but we don't have time. But how really the glory of the Lord did show up when Jesus came into the temple. But anyway, well, we can't get into that because we got. So that's Ezekiel, the glory of God. Now remember, he's saying we're talking about the glory of God in the midst of we're in exile. And later on the temple's destroyed, but God's glory remains, and He will come back. Then also another exile, Daniel. He was taken in the first of the 3 exiles, and it's God's plan for the future. God's plan for the future. Now, there's one thing that's unique about Daniel is there is a storyline in Daniel. So you do have a little bit of story and some neat stories there. But in the midst of giving the story, you have these dreams or visions or revelations that are given, and it's God's plan for the nations. For one, where Nebuchadnezzar has this dream of this statue that's with a head of gold and arms of silver and the waist of bronze, and then the legs of iron that turn to iron and clay, and stuff like that. And he's like, this is the future of the Gentiles, starting with the head of gold, Babylon, to the Medo-Persian Empire, to the to Greece, and then finally to Rome. We're going to be using that image next week when we're talking about what happens between the testaments, because it fits beautifully together and stuff. And so you have for the nations, but then you also have what's the future for the Jews. And again, more weird images of beast and this and that, and then the explanation given of what the 70 weeks are and all that. But again, we're not going to get into all that because we can be here for days. That's Daniel, God's plan for the future. Hosea, the loyal love of God. Hosea, a godly man, God gives him this command. Marry Gomer, golly. Anyway, and Gomer was not faithful, and yet he was commanded to love her anyway, and to keep loving her. And there's a lot of images. Again, when you look, Hosea is actually one of the prophets to Israel, the northern kingdom, and the picture that God, I still love you. I still love you. And what a beautiful picture of him purchasing back his bride. And so again, there's a lot of judgment's going to happen because there's kids and they're all given weird names that have meanings of I'm not your people, you are not my people, things like that. So how would you like to name your kid that? Okay, you're not mine. So that is Hosea, but God's loyal love despite our unfaithfulness. Joel, the day of the Lord. A lot of people go, yeah, the day of the Lord, yeah. So what's the day of the Lord look like? Well, in Joel's day, and again, it's the only one I put a question mark because they're not exactly sure when it happened, and that's the most likely place. But there was a plague of locusts that just overcame and ate, what they didn't eat. Another wave came through and they ate more, and another wave came and ate more, stuff like that. And so it's pictured the day of the Lord. It's like this locust just destroying everything. And then he switches it from a locust army to a real army coming and destroying everything because God's judgment is coming. So one of the things that I like near the end of Joel, he talks about that God will restore what the locusts have eaten. That God can restore. Yes, God will judge. God loves us enough to discipline. And he can restore. So again, that's Joel, the day of the Lord. Amos, judgment of Israel. Amos, if you look on that prophecy timeline, he's over on the other side. He's actually from Judah. Nothing like going to your unfriendly brother's kingdom, because they're all related. But and so he talks about, imagine a foreigner coming, and talking about, America, it's all doomed and all that. It's like, you're a foreigner, you don't know anything. So he comes in. Now, wisdom as well as inspiration of the Holy Spirit, he comes in and says, for 3 sins, I'm going to judge. And he mentions, a nation. For 4 sins, I'm going to get them and all that. And he elaborates on just one of them, And he goes through nation after nation. And here's Israel. They're going, yeah, you go get them, God. You go get them. And the second to the last nation that's mentioned is Judah. For 3 sins of Judah, even for 4, I'm going to get them. And they're like, yeah. And then he goes, for 3 sins, for 4 of Israel. And he ends on them and camps out there. He only mentions one on the others. He mentions all of them and he goes the rest of the time. And they eventually just say, go back to your farm and pick figs. But, there's images that are also given there. One of the ones that is like a plumb line. A plumb line is a string with a weight on it to say, is it straight? And God's saying, no. And I'm going to have to tear down this wall. So anyway, so that's Amos, famous Amos. Then you have Obadiah. Obadiah. One of the few prophets that aren't towards Judah or Israel, but towards Edom. Edom. Where's Edom? Edom's around where Robin is and Faye. Because on the nation was kind of on the lower east side of the Dead Sea. And so that's the country that came from Esau and all of his descendants and everything. So they looked with gladness upon the disaster that was happening to Israel, and then also, let me see the timeline here, to Israel and to Judah. Anytime somebody came and attacked them, they're like, ha ha, hey, can we join in? Can we help you? Not help Israel, not help Judah, but can we help the enemies? And so that's why it's on the judgment of Edom. Let me just read. It's only one chapter, one of those one chapter books. Verse 15 says, the day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head. Judgment on Edom. Then you have Jonah. I call it the running prophet. And again, this goes back to a sermon I've heard from multiple. I don't know whoever started it, and I think I've used the same outline. Here's the book of Jonah in 4 chapters, 4 movements. First chapter, he's running from God. God says, go preach to Nineveh. I don't want to. He goes the other way. A prophet running from God. Then you have him running to God. He's thrown overboard. He's in the well. And he's like, okay, God, okay. So he's running back to God. Then he's running with God. He goes and does what God tells him to do and prophesies against Assyria, the kingdom, which is the city of Nineveh. And then the last chapter is he's running before God or ahead of God because he's like, well, God, you should still judge him. How dare you forgive him? And so that's why I call him the running prophet. It's a weird book in that it just ends. It's like, kind of Jonah has a tantrum because God doesn't judge. He sits and just waits, and stuff, and just like, like he's watching, popcorn and everything, for God to destroy it. He doesn't do it, and he's all upset, and he's like, and it just ends. So anyway, and so that's Jonah, and it's again one of those prophets that was directed to go to another nation, like Obadiah to Esau, Jonah to the city-state of Nineveh, which is also Assyria. Then you have Micah. Israel's day in court. Israel's day in court. Let me just read the second verse of You'll get the flavor here. Hear, O peoples, all of you, listen, O earth, and all who are in it, that the sovereign Lord may witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple. So he's like, all you nations, come, I'm about to pronounce judgment. Okay, then chapter 6, verse 2. Hear, O mountains, the Lord's accusation. Listen, you everlasting foundations of the earth. For the Lord has a case against his people. He is lodging a charge against Israel. So, Israel's day in court. Now, Micah is famous for Micah 5:2. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, out of you will come one to judge, to lead my people. It's like, where's the Messiah going to be born? In Bethlehem, because that's what Micah 5:2 says. Anyway, so that was real famous. But see, here it is he's talking about, again, in his judgments, there's a lot of different judgments. There's things they're doing wickedly and just justice isn't happening, all that. But the leaders, unjust leaders. But then he contrasts them, saying, but there's another one coming, and he will shepherd my people. So again, that's how that one fits into Israel's day in court from Micah. Then you have Nahum. Nahum. I say it that way because that's what that guy in the video, that's how he pronounces it. I just called it Nahum. But anyway, judgment on Nineveh. Oh, I thought Jonah pronounced judgment and they repented and Nineveh was spared. That's the reason Jonah didn't want, because Jonah as a prophet knew that Assyria was going to be used to destroy them. So do you want someone who's going to come and destroy you to survive God's judgment? No, and that's why one of the reasons Jonah was upset. But this is 100 years later. Yes, Nineveh, repented, but then they went back to their wicked ways, and then they went and they became this major power, and they conquered, nation after nation, especially through. At 722, destroyed Israel and scattered them. And so Nahum is saying, it's your turn. Now judgment will fall on you. And then soon after that is when Babylon rose and conquered them. Now, Habakkuk. Habakkuk is the complaining prophet. The complaining prophet. He starts off, God, why are you letting all this wickedness happening? How come you're letting, and he's talking about his own country. God, why are you allowing, wickedness and all these things that are happening? How come what are you going to do and all that? And so God tells him, okay, I'm going to use the Chaldeans, which is another name for Babylon. I'm going to use the Chaldeans to come and judge you. Oh God, how could you do that? They're more wicked than we are. And he goes back and forth and stuff like that. Now, ultimately, Habakkuk gets right and stuff as God. This is from one of my commentaries on this. Habakkuk's book begins with an interrogation of God, but ends up as an intercession to God. Worry is transformed into worship. Fear turns to faith. Terror becomes trust. Hang-ups are resolved with hope. Anguish melts into adoration. What begins with a question mark ends with an exclamation point. The answer to Habakkuk's why is who. His confusion, why all this conflict, is resolved with his comprehension of who is in control. God. I saw that was really worded well and stuff like that. Because he does get there. He starts griping and complaining. But let's listen. Where should you take your complaints? You take them to the Lord and let him adjust you. That's a great picture of that. Anyway, that's Habakkuk. Zephaniah. Zephaniah, the wrath of God. The wrath of God. It's a short book, and it uses the day of the Lord a lot as well and all that. But he just said, basically the message is the wrath of God is deserved. You guys have done enough. And it goes back, if you look at the timeline on the other side, I got to find it. Where'd he go? Zephaniah is right after Manasseh's reign. Josiah is a good king, but it's too bad, too late. Manasseh was so wicked, God was going to be judging Judah and stuff. So that it's deserved. It's consistent. I mean, God's judging this nation, this nation, this nation, this nation. Why would he not judge you, Judah? And also it's temporary, that God will then restore. That's Zephaniah. And then you have Haggai and then Zechariah. I want you to look on the back sheet. And you look all the way down to Zerubbabel. Again, what did Zerubbabel, when he brought people back, what did they do? They built the temple, okay? Well, they started building the temple in 536 BC. 2 years later, they stopped because there was a little bit of opposition. And so they didn't want to, whatever. So they stopped. And 20 years later, God brought up two prophets, Haggai as well as Zechariah. And so Haggai, very short book, 2 chapters. It's rebuilding the temple. And then you have Zechariah is preparing for the Messiah. That one day this is going to be the ground that the Messiah comes on. How do we prepare the way? And that's what Zechariah is about. And then Malachi, and again, if you look on your last, he's in there at the same time Nehemiah is. And it's about facing spiritual apathy. I mean, the people who had been exiled and miraculously returned, and saw the temple rebuilt, saw the walls rebuilt, saw all this other stuff, yet God is saying, why don't you love me anymore? What do you mean we don't love you? And just like, well, you're giving sacrifices that are lame and sick. We're holding back our tithes. And he goes through all these different things of showing the apathy that Judah still had to the Lord. And it's something that God would work on them. They actually ceased being apathetic later. They were zealous, but they were zealous in the wrong ways. And we'll see how that happened next week. So, one more time. Now I get to fit all these guys in here. So, all right, here we go. Creation, fall, flood, nations 4,000 years ago. Persian Gulf, Salt, Sarah, Abraham, Lot, Terah, Tigris, Euphrates, Haran, Terah dies. Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, Dead Sea, Mediterranean Sea, Ishmael, Isaac, Esau, Jacob, Joseph, Egypt, Jews, Egypt, 400 years, bondage. Let's hear your mic. Moses! Let my people go. No. 10 plagues, Passover, Red Sea, Mount Sinai, law, tabernacle, Levites and priests, offerings and feasts, counting the faces, Kadesh, oasis, 12 spies, wanders, dies. Moab, Moses, second law, dies. Joshua, Jordan River, Jericho, divides, conquers, south, north, divides, settles, 12 tribes. Judges, 400 years. Deborah, Gideon, Samson. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes except Ruth and Samuel, who brought the United Kingdom 120 years. Saul, no heart. David, whole heart. Solomon, half heart, which led to the divided kingdom. 400 years. North, south, Israel, Judah. 1920-08. Prophets speak, and we just heard them. Shape up or ship out. Assyria, Israel scatters. Babylon, Judah exiles. 70 years. Persia, again, I'm pointing to the same place because all of these were the same place, just different times. Persia, Judah returns. Came in 3 waves. Zerubbabel, who built up the temple. You had Esther, the queen. You had Ezra, who built the people up.
Woo! Rock and roll!
He built the people. And then you have Nehemiah built the walls. 400 years, silence, Christ. And again, next week we are going to go, what do you mean silence? Let's find out what God did in those 400 years. Have these sheets if you want to get the, here's all the lists. And I also added the prophets in a different way of saying, here's not so much the timeline, but here's who they prophesied to and all that. So I'm going to put this back on here for you to take.
You had a little diagram of those movements that decided what this is.
That's what you go on YouTube and watch this
Over and over and over again.
It's there. Pick your week. So you get to watch me a lot. I did stop this, didn't I? No, I didn't.